Chapter 13. How the Outlaws Shot in King Harry's Tourney. The king is into Finsbury Field, marching in battle ray, and after follows bold Robin Hood, and all his yeomen gay. The morning of the great archery contest dawned fair and bright, bringing with it a fever of impatience to every citizen of London town, from the proudest courtier to the lowest kitchen wench. Aye, and all the surrounding country was early awake too, and began to wend their way to Finsbury Field, a fine broad stretch of practice ground near Moorfields. Around three sides of the field were erected tier upon tier of seats for the spectators, with the royal boxes and booths for the nobility and gentry in the center. Down along one end were pitched gaily colored tents for the different bands of king's archers. There were 10 of these bands, each containing a score of men headed by a captain of great renown. So today there were 10 of the pavilions, each bearing aloft the royal arms and vari-colored pennants which fluttered lightly in the fresh morning breeze. Each captain's flag was of peculiar color and device. First came the royal purple streamer of Tepus, own bow-bearer to the king, and esteemed the finest archer in all the land. Then came the yellow of Clifton of Buckinghamshire, and the blue of Gilbert of the White Hand, he who was renowned in Nottinghamshire, and the green of Elwin the Welshman, and the white of Robert of Cloudsdale. And after them 5 other captains of bands, each a man of proved prowess. As the Queen had said aforetime, the King was mightily proud of his archers, and now held this tourney to show their skill, and mayhap to recruit their forces. The uprising tiers of seats filled early, upon this summer morning, and the merry chatter of the people went abroad like the hum of bees in a hive. The royal party had not yet put in an appearance, nor were any of the king's archers visible. So the crowd was content to hide its impatience by laughing jibes passed from one section to another, and crying the colors of their favorite archers. In and out among the seats went hawkers, their arms laden with small pennants to correspond with the rival tents. Other vendors of pie and small cakes and cider also did a thrifty business, for so eager had some of the people been to get good seats that they had rushed away from home without their breakfast. Suddenly the gates at the far end, next to the tents, opened wide, and a courier in scarlet and gold, mounted upon a white horse, rode in blowing lustily upon the trumpet at his lips, and behind him came 6 standard-bearers riding abreast. The populace arose with a mighty cheer. King Harry had entered the arena. He bestrode a fine white charger and was clad in a rich dark suit of slashed velvet with satin and gold facings. His hat bore a long curling ostrich plume of pure white, and he doffed it graciously in answer to the shouts of the people. By his side rode Queen Eleanor, looking regal and charming in her long brocade riding habit, while immediately behind them came Prince Richard and Prince John, each attired in knightly coats of mail and helmets. Lords and ladies of the realm followed, and finally the 10 companies of archers, whose progress round the field was greeted with hardly less applause than that given the king himself. The king and queen dismounted from their steeds, ascended the steps of the royal box, and seated themselves upon 2 thrones, decked with purple and gold trapping, upon a dais sheltered by striped canvas. In the booths at each end the members of the court took their places, while comely pages ran hither and thither bearing the royal commands. 'Twas a lordly sight, I ween, these shifting of proud courtiers, flashing of jeweled fans, and commingling of bright colors with costly gems. Now the herald arose to command peace, and soon the clear note of his bugle rose above the roar of the crowd and hushed it to silence. The 10 score archers ranged themselves in 2 long rows on each side of the lists, a gallant array, while their captains, as a special mark of favor, stood near the royal box. "Come hither, Tepus," said the king to his bow-bearer. "Come, measure me out this line, how long our mark must be." "What is the reward?" then asked the queen. "That will the herald presently proclaim," answered the king. "For first prize we have offered a purse containing 20 golden pounds, for second a purse containing 20 silver pennies, and for third a silver bugle, inlaid with gold." Moreover, if the king's companies keep these prizes, the winning companies shall have first 2 tons of Rhenish wine, second 2 tons of English beer, and third 5 of the fattest harts that run on Dalham Lee. Methinks that is a princely wager, added King Harry laughingly. Up spake bold Clifton, secure in the king's favour. Measure no marks for us, most sovereign liege, quoth he, for such largesse as that we'll shoot at the sun and the moon. 'Twill not be so far as that, said the king, but get a line of good length, Tepus, and set up the targets at 10 score paces. Forthwith Tepus bowed low and set up 10 targets, each bearing the pennant of a different company, while the herald stood forth again and proclaimed the rules and prizes. The entries were open to all comers. Each man also of the king's archers should shoot 3 arrows at the target bearing the colors of his band, until the best bowman in each band should be chosen. These 10 chosen archers should then enter a contest for an open target, 3 shots apiece, and here any other bowman whatsoever was asked to try his skill. The result at the open targets should decide the tourney. Then all the people shouted again in token that the terms of the contest pleased them, and the archers waved their bows aloft and wheeled into position facing their respective targets. The shooting now began, upon all the targets at once, and the multitude had so much ado to watch them that they forgot to shout. Besides, silence was commanded during the shooting. Of all the fine shooting that morning, I have not now space to tell you. The full score of men shot 3 times at each target, and then 3 times again to decide a tie. For, more than once, the arrows shot by one man would be split wide open by his successor. Each man's shaft bore his number to ease the counting, and so close would they stick at the end of a round that the target looked like a big bristle hairbrush. Then must the spectators relieve their tense spirits by great cheering, while the king looked mighty proud of his skilled bowmen. At last the company targets were decided, and Tepus, as was expected, led the score, having made 6 exact centers in succession. Gilbert of the White Hand followed with 5, and Clifton with 4. 2 other captains had touched their center 4 times, but not roundly, while in the other companies it so chanced that the captains had been outshot by some of the men under them. The winners then saluted the king and queen, and withdrew for a space to rest and renew their bowstrings for the keenest contest of all. While the lists were cleared and a new target, the open one, was set up at 12 score paces. At the bidding of the king, the herald announced that the open target was to be shot at, to decide the title of the best archer in all England, and any man there present was privileged to try for it. But so keen had been the previous shooting that many yeomen who had come to enter the list now would not do so, and only a dozen men stepped forth to give in their names. "By my halidom," said the king, "these must be hardy men to pit themselves against my archers." "Think you that your 10 chosen fellows are the best bowmen in all England?" asked the queen. "Aye, and in all the world beside," answered the king, "and thereunto I would stake 500 pounds." "I am minded to take your wager," said the queen musingly, "and will e'en do so if you grant me a boon." "What is it?" asked the king. "If I produce 5 archers who can outshoot your 10, will you grant my men full grace and amnesty?" "Assuredly," quoth the king in right good humor. "Natheless, I tell you now, your wager is in jeopardy, for there never were such bowmen as Tepus and Clifton and Gilbert." Said the queen, puckering her brow, still as though lost in thought. "I must see if there be none present to aid me in my wager. Boy, call hither Sir Richard of the Lea and my Lord Bishop of Hereford." The 2 summoned ones, who had been witnessing the sport, came forward. "Sir Richard," said she, "thou art a full knight and good. Wouldst advise me to meet a wager of the king's, that I can produce other archers as good as Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton?" "Nay, your majesty," he said, bending his knee, "there be none present that can match them. Howbeit," he added, dropping his voice, "I have heard of some who lie hid in Sherwood Forest, who could show them strange targets." The queen smiled and dismissed him. "Come hither, my Lord Bishop of Hereford," quoth she. "Wouldst thou advance a sum to support my wager against the king?" "Nay, your majesty," said the fat bishop, "and you pardon me, I'd not lay down a penny on such a bet. For by my silver mitre, the king's archers are men who have no peers." "But suppose I found men whom thou knewest to be masters at the bow," she insisted roguishly, "wouldst thou not back them? Belike I have heard that there be men round about Nottingham and Plympton who carry such matters with a high hand." The bishop glanced nervously around, as if half expecting to see Robin Hood's men standing near, then turned to find the Queen looking at him with much amusement lurking in her eyes. "Odds bodkins, the story of my misadventure must have preceded me," he thought ruefully. Aloud he said, resolved to face it out, "Your Majesty, such tales are idle and exaggerated. And you pardon me, I would add to the king's wager that his men are invincible." "As it pleases thee," replied the Queen imperturbably. "How much?" "Here is my purse," said the bishop uneasily. "It contains 15 score nobles and near 100 pounds." "I'll take it at even money," she said, dismissing him. "And your Majesty," turning to the King, who had been conversing with the 2 princes and certain of the nobles, "I accept your wager of 500 pounds." "Very good," said the King, laughing as though it were a great jest. "But what had minded you to take such interest in the sport of a sudden?" "It is as I have said. I have found 5 men whom I will pit against any you may produce." "Then we will try their skill speedily," quoth the King. "How say you, if first we decide this open target, and then match the 5 best thereat against your unknown champions?" "Agreed," said the Queen. Thereupon she signed to Maid Marian to step forward from a near-by booth where she sat with other ladies in waiting, and whispered something in her ear. Marian curtsied and withdrew. Now the 10 chosen archers from the King's bands came forth again and took their stand, and with them stood forth the 12 untried men from the open lists. Again the crowd was stilled, and every eye hung upon the speeding of the shafts. Slowly but skillfully each man shot, and as his shaft struck within the inner ring, a deep breath broke from the multitude like the sound of the wind upon the seashore. And now Gilbert of the White Hand led the shooting, and 'twas only by the space of a hair's breadth upon the line that Tepus tied his score. Stout Elwyn, the Welshman, took 3rd place. One of the private archers, named Geoffrey, came fourth, while Clifton must needs content himself with 5th. The men from the open list shot fairly true, but nervousness and fear of ridicule wrought their undoing. Then the herald came forward again, and instead of announcing the prize winners, proclaimed that there was to be a final contest. 2 men had tied for first place, declared His Majesty the King, and 3 others were entitled to honors. Now all these 5 were to shoot again, and they were to be pitted against 5 other of the Queen's choosing, men who had not yet shot upon that day. A thrill of astonishment and excitement swept through the arena. Who were these men of the Queen's choosing? Was upon every lip. The hubbub of eager voices grew intense, and in the midst of it all, the gate at the far end of the field opened, and 5 men entered and escorted a lady upon horseback across the arena to the royal box. The lady was instantly recognized as Mistress Marian of the Queen's household, but no one seemed to know the faces of her escort. 4 were clad in Lincoln green, while the 5th, who seemed to be the leader, was dressed in a brave suit of scarlet red. Each man wore a close-fitting cap of black, decked with a curling white feather. For arms they carried simply a stout bow, a sheaf of new arrows, and a short hunting knife. When the little party came before the dais upon which the King and Queen sat, the yeomen doffed their caps humbly, while Maid Marian was assisted to dismount. "Your gracious Majesty," she said, addressing the Queen, "these be the men for whom you sent me, and who are now come to wear your colors and service you in the tourney." The Queen leaned forward and handed them each a scarf of green and gold. "Locksley," she said in a clear voice, "I thank thee and thy men for this service. Know that I have laid a wager with the King that ye can outshoot the 5 best whom he has found in all his bowmen." The 5 men pressed the scarves to their lips in token of fealty. The King turned to the Queen inquiringly. "Who are these men you have brought before us?" asked he. Up came the worthy Bishop of Hertford, growing red and pale by turns. "Your pardon, my liege lord," cried he, "but I must denounce these fellows as outlaws. Yon man in scarlet is none other than Robin Hood himself. The others are Little John and Will Stuteley and Will Scarlet and Allen a Dale, all famous in the north country for their deeds of violence." "As my Lord Bishop personally knows," added the Queen significantly. The King's brows grew dark. The name of Robin Hood was well known to him, as to every man there present. "Is this true?" he demanded sternly. "Aye, my lord," responded the Queen demurely. "But bethink you, I have your royal promise of grace and amnesty." "That will I keep," said the King, holding in check his ire by a mighty effort. "But look you, only 40 days do I grant of respite. When this time has elapsed, let these bold outlaws look to their safety." Then turning to his 5 victorious archers who had drawn near, he added, "Ye have heard, my men, how that I have a wager with the Queen upon your prowess. Now here be men of her choosing, certain free shafts of Sherwood and Barnesdale. Wherefore look well to it, Gilbert and Tepus and Geoffrey and Elwyn and Clifton. If ye outshoot these knaves, I will fill your caps with silver pennies. Aye, and knight the man who stands first. But if ye lose, I give the prizes, for which ye have just striven, to Robin Hood and his men, according to my royal word." Robin Hood and his men! The Seine flew around the arena with the speed of wildfire, and every neck craned forward to see the famous fellows who had dared to brave the King's anger because of the Queen. Another target was now set up, at the same distance as the last, and it was decided that the 10 archers should shoot 3 arrows in turn. Gilbert and Robin tossed up a penny for the lead, and it fell to the King's men. So Clifton was bidden to shoot first. Forth he stood, planting his feet firmly and wetting his fingers before plucking the string, for he was resolved to better his losing score of that day. And in truth he did so, for the shaft he loosed sped true and landed on the black bull's-eye, though not in the exact center. Again he shot, and again he hit the black, on the opposite rim. The third shaft swerved downward and came within the second ring, some 2 fingers' breadths away. Natheless a general cry went up, as this was the best shooting Clifton had done that day. Will Scarlet was chosen to follow him, and now took his place and carefully chose 3 round and full feathered arrows. "Careful, my sweet coz," quoth Robin in a low tone. "The knave has left wide space at the center for all of your darts." But Robin gave Will the wrong caution, for overmuch care spoiled his aim. His first shaft flew wide and lodged in the second ring, even farther away than the worst shot of Clifton. "Your pardon, coz," quoth Robin hastily. "Bid care go to the bottom of the sea, and do you loose your string before it sticks to your fingers." And Will profited by this hint, and loosed his next 2 shafts as freely as though they flew along a Sherwood glade. Each struck upon the bull's-eye, and one even nearer the center than his rival's mark. Yet the total score was adjudged in favor of Clifton. At this Will Scarlet bit his lip, but said no word, while the crowd shouted and waved yellow flags for very joy that the King's man had overcome the outlaw. They knew also that this demonstration would please the King. The target was now cleared for the next 2 contestants, Geoffrey and Allen a Dale, whereat it was noticed that many ladies in the Queen's booths boldly flaunted Allen's colors, much to the honest pride which glowed in the cheeks of one who sat in their midst. "In good truth," said more than one lady to Mistress Dale, "if thy husband can handle the longbow as skillfully as the harp, his rival has little show of winning." The saying augured well. Geoffrey had shot many good shafts that day, and indeed had risen from the ranks by virtue of them. But now each of his 3 shots, though well placed in triangular fashion around the rim of the bull's-eye, yet allowed an easy space for Allen to graze within. His shooting, moreover, was so prettily done that he was right heartily applauded, the ladies and their gallants leading in the hand-clapping. Now you must know that there had long been a friendly rivalry in Robin Hood's band as to who was the best shot, next after Robin himself. He and Will Stuteley had lately decided their marksmanship, and Will had found that Robin's skill was now so great as to place the leader at the head of all good bowmen in the forest. But the second place lay between Little John and Stuteley, and neither wished to yield to the other. So today they looked narrowly at their leader to see who would shoot third. Robin read their faces at a glance, and laughing merrily, broke off 2 straws and held them out. "The long straw goes next," he decided, and it fell to Stuteley. Elwyn the Welshman was to precede him, and his score was no whit better than Geoffrey's. But Stuteley failed to profit by it. His besetting sin in archery had ever been an undue haste and carelessness. Today these were increased by a certain moodiness, that Little John had outranked him. So his first two shafts flew swiftly, one after the other, to lodging places outside the Welshman's mark. "Man, man!" cried Robin entreatingly, "you do forget the honor of the Queen, and the credit of Sherwood." "I ask your pardon, master," quoth Will humbly enough, and loosing as he spoke his last shaft. It whistled down the course unerringly and struck in the exact center, the best shot yet made. Now some shouted for Stuteley and some shouted for Elwin, but Elwin's total mark was declared the better. Whereupon the King turned to the Queen. "What say you now?" quoth he in some triumph. "2 out of the 3 first rounds have gone to my men. Your outlaws will have to shoot better than that in order to save your wager." The Queen smiled gently. "Yea, my lord," she said, "but the twain who are left are able to do the shooting. You forget that I still have Little John and Robin Hood." "And you forget, my lady, that I still have Tepus and Gilbert." So each turned again to the lists and awaited the next rounds in silent eagerness. I ween that King Harry had never watched the invasion of an enemy with more anxiety than he now felt. Tepus was chosen to go next, and he fell into the same error with Will Scarlet. He held the string a moment too long, and both his first and second arrows came to grief. One of them, however, came within the black rim, and he followed it up by placing his third in the full center, just as Stuteley had done in his last. These 2 centers were the fairest shots that had been made that day, and loud was the applause which greeted this second one. But the shouting was as nothing to the uproar which followed Little John's shooting. That good-natured giant seemed determined to outdo Tepus by a tiny margin in each separate shot. For the first and the second shafts grazed his rivals on the inner side, while the third Little John did the old trick of the forest. He shot his own arrow in a graceful curve which descended from above Tepus's final center shaft with a glancing blow that drove the other out and left the outlaws in its place. The King could scarce believe his eyes. "By my halidome," quoth he, "that fellow deserves either a dukedom or a hanging. He must be in league with Satan himself. Never saw I such shooting." "The score is tied, my lord," said the Queen. "We have still to see Gilbert and Robin Hood." Gilbert now took his stand and slowly shot his arrows, one after another, into the bull's-eye. 'Twas the best shooting he had done yet, but there was still the smallest of spaces left, if you looked closely, at the very center. "Well done, Gilbert," spoke up Robin Hood. "You are a foeman worthy of being shot against." He took his own place as he spoke. "Now if you had placed one of your shafts there," loosing one of his own, "and another there," out sped the second, "and another there," the third was launched. Mayhap the King would have declared you the best bowman in all England. But the last part of his merry speech was drowned in the wild tumult of applause which followed his exploit. His first 2 shafts had packed themselves into the small space left at the bull's-eye, while his third had split down between them, taking half of each and making all 3 appear from a distance as one immense arrow. Up rose the King in amazement and anger. "Gilbert is not yet beaten," he cried. "Did he not shoot within the mark thrice? And that is allowed a best in all the rules of archery." Robin bowed low. "As it please your majesty," quoth he, "but may I be allowed to place the mark for the second shooting?" The King waved his hand sullenly. Thereupon Robin prepared another old trick of the greenwood, and got him a light peeled willow wand, which he set in the ground in place of the target. "There, friend Gilbert," cried he gaily, "belike you can hit that." "I can scarce see it from here," said Gilbert, "much less hit it. Natheless, for the King's honor, I will try." But this final shot proved his undoing, and his shaft flew harmlessly by the thin white streak. Then came Robin to his stand again, and picked his arrow with exceeding care, and tried his string. Amid a breathless pause he drew the good yew bow back to his ear, glanced along the shaft, and let the feathered missile fly. Straight it sped, singing a keen note of triumph as it went. The willow wand was split in twain, as though it had met a hunter's knife. "Verily, I think your bow is armed with witchcraft," cried Gilbert, "for I did not believe such shooting possible." "You should come to see our merry lads in the greenwood," retorted Robin lightly. for willow wands do not grow upon the cobblestones of London town." Meanwhile the King in great wrath had risen to depart, first signing the judges to distribute the prizes. Never a word said he, of good or ill, to the Queen, but mounted his horse, and followed by his sons and knights rode off the field. The archers dropped upon one knee as he passed, but he gave them a single baleful look and was gone. Then the Queen beckoned the outlaws to approach, and they did so and knelt at her feet. "Right well have ye served me," she said, "and sorry am I that the King's anger is aroused thereby. But fear ye not, his word and grace hold true. As to these prizes ye have gained, I add others of my own. The wagers I have won from his Majesty the King, and from the Lord Bishop of Hereford. Buy with some of these moneys the best swords ye can find in London for all your band, and call them the swords of the Queen, and swear with them to protect all the poor and the helpless and the womenkind who come your way." "We swear," said the 5 yeomen solemnly. Then the Queen gave each of them her hand to kiss, and arose and departed with all her ladies. And after they were gone, the King's archers came crowding around Robin and his men, eager to get a glimpse of the fellows about whom they had heard so much. And back of them came a great crowd of the spectators, pushing and jostling in their efforts to come nearer. "Verily," laughed Little John, "they must take us for a merry Andrew show." Now the judges came up and announced each man his prize, according to the King's command. To Robin was give the purse containing 20 golden pounds, to Little John the 20 silver pennies, and to Allan a Dale the fine inlaid bugle, much to his delight, for he was skilled at blowing sweet tunes upon the horn, hardly less than handling the harp strings. But when the Rhenish wine and the English beer and hearts of Dalamlee were spoken of, Robin said, "Nay, what need we of wine or beer so far from the greenwood? And 'twould be like carrying coals to Newcastle to drive those hearts to Sherwood. Now Gilbert and Tepus and their men have shot passing well, wherefore the meat and drink must go to them, and they will accept it of us." "Right gladly," replied Gilbert, grasping his hand. "Ye are good men all, and we will toast you every one in memory of the greatest day at archery that England has ever seen or ever will see." Thus said all the King's archers, and the hand of good fellowship was given amid much shouting and clapping on the shoulder blades. And so ended King Harry's tourney, whose story has been handed down from sire to son, even unto the present day. So ends Chapter 13. Chapter 14. How Robin Hood was sought of the Tinker. And while the Tinker fell asleep, Robin made haste away, and left the Tinker in the lurch for the great shot to pay. King Henry was as good as his word. Robin Hood and his party were suffered to depart from London, the parting bringing keen sorrow to Marion, and for 40 days no hand was raised against them. But at the end of that time the royal word was sent to the worthy sheriff at Nottingham that he must lay hold upon the outlaws without further delay, as he valued his office. Indeed, the exploits of Robin and his band, ending with the great tourney in Finsbury Field, had made a mighty stir through all England, and many there were to laugh boldly at the Nottingham official for his failures to capture the outlaws. The sheriff thereupon planned 3 new expeditions into the greenwood, and was even brave enough to lead them, since he had 15 score men at his beck and call each time. But never the shadow of an outlaw did he see, for Robin's men lay close, and the sheriff's men knew not how to come at their chief hiding place in the cove before the cavern. Now the sheriff's daughter had hated Robin Hood bitterly in her heart ever since the day he refused to bestow upon her the golden arrow, and shamed her before all the company. His tricks also upon her father were not calculated to lessen her hatred, and so she sought about for means to aid the sheriff in catching the enemy. "There is no need to go against this man with force of arms," she said. "We must meet his tricks with other tricks of our own." "Would that we could," groaned the sheriff. "The fellow is becoming a nightmare unto me." "Let me plan a while," she replied. "Belike I can cook up some scheme for his undoing." "Agreed," said the sheriff. "And if anything comes of your planning, I will even give you 100 silver pennies for a new gown and a double reward to the man who catches the outlaws." Now upon that same day, while the sheriff's daughter was racking her brains for a scheme, there came to the mansion house a strolling tinker named Middle, a great gossip and braggart. And as he pounded away upon some pots and pans in the scullery, he talked loudly about what he would do if he once came within reach of that rascal Robin Hood. It might be that this simple fellow could do something through his very simplicity, mused the sheriff's daughter, overhearing his prattle. Odds bodkins, 'twill do no harm to try his service, while I bethink myself of some better plan. And she called him to her, and looked him over, a big brawny fellow enough, with an honest look about the eye, and a countenance so open that when he smiled his mouth seemed the only country on the map. I am minded to try your skill at outlaw catching, she said, and will add goodly measure to the stated reward if you succeed. Do you wish to make good your boasted prowess? The tinker grinned broadly. Yes, your ladyship, he said. Then here is a warrant made out this morning by the sheriff himself. See that you keep it safely and use it to good advantage. And she dismissed him. Middle departed from the house mightily pleased with himself and proud of his commission. He swung his crab-tree staff recklessly in his glee, so recklessly that he imperiled the shins of more than one angry passer-by, and vowed he'd crack the ribs of Robin Hood with it, though he was surrounded by every outlaw in the whole greenwood. Spurred on by the thoughts of his own coming bravery, he left the town and proceeded toward Barnesdale. The day was hot and dusty, and at noontime he paused at a wayside inn to refresh himself. He began by eating and drinking and dozing in turn, then sought to do all at once. Mine host of the Seven Does stood by, discussing the eternal Robin with a drover. Folk do say that my Lord Sheriff has sent into Lincoln for more men-at-arms and horses, and that when he has these behind him, he'll soon rid the forest of these fellows. Of whom speak you? Asked the tinker, sitting up. Of Robin Hood and his men, said the host. But go to sleep again. You will never get the reward. And why not? Asked the tinker, rising with great show of dignity. Where our sheriff has failed, and the stout Guy of Gisborne, and many more beside, it behoves not a mere tinker to succeed. The tinker laid a heavy hand upon the innkeeper's fat shoulder and tried to look impressive. This is your reckoning, host, upon the table. I must even go upon my way, because I have more important business than to stand here gossiping with you. But be not surprised, if, the next time you see me, I shall have with me no less person than Robin Hood himself. And he strode loftily out the door and walked up the hot white road towards Barnesdale. He had not gone above a quarter of a mile when he met a young man with curling brown hair and merry eyes. The young man carried his light cloak over his arm because of the heat, and was unarmed save for a light sword at his side. The newcomer eyed the perspiring tinker in a friendly way, and seeing he was a stout fellow, accosted him. "Good day to you," said he. "Good day to you," said the tinker, "and a morrow less heating." "Aye," laughed the other. "Whence come you? And know you the news?" "What is the news?" said the gossipy tinker, pricking up his ear. "I am a tinker by trade, Middle by name, and come over against Banbury." "Why, as for the news," laughed the stranger, "I hear that 2 tinkers were set in the stocks for drinking too much ale and beer." "If that be all your news," retorted Middle, "I can beat you clear to the end of the lane." "What news have you? Seeing that you go from town to town, I ween you can outdo a poor country yokel at tidings." "All I have to tell," said the other, "is that I am especially commissioned." He felt mightily proud of these big words. "Especially commissioned to seek a bold outlaw which they call Robin Hood." "So," said the other, arching his brows. "How especially commissioned?" "I have a warrant from the sheriff, sealed with the king's own seal, to take him where I can. And if you can tell me where he is, I will e'en make a man of you." "Let me see the warrant," said the other, "to satisfy myself if it be right, and I will do the best I can to bring him to you." "That will I not," replied the tinker. "I will trust none with it, and if you'll not help me to come at him, I must forsooth catch him by myself." And he made his crabtree staff whistle shrill circles in the air. The other smiled at the tinker's simplicity, and said, "The middle of the road on a hot July day is not a good place to talk things over. Now if you're the man for me and I'm the man for you, let's go back to the inn just beyond the bend of road and quench our thirst and cool our heads for thinking." "Marry, come up," quoth the tinker. "That I will, for though I've just come from there, my thirst rises mightily at the sound of your voice." So back he turned with the stranger and proceeded to the Seven Does. The landlord arched his eyebrows silently when he saw the two come in, but served them willingly. The tinker asked for wine, and Robin for ale. The wine was not the most cooling drink in the cellar, nor the clearest headed. Natheless the tinker asked for it, since it was expensive and the other man had invited him to drink. They lingered long over their cups, Master Middle emptying one after another, while the stranger expounded at great length on the best plans for coming at and capturing Robin Hood. In the end the tinker fell sound asleep while in the act of trying to get a tankard to his lips. Then the stranger deftly opened the snoring man's pouch, took out the warrant, read it, and put it in his own wallet. Calling mine host to him, he winked at him with a half smile, and told him the tinker would pay the whole score when he awoke. Thus was Master Middle left in the lurch, for the great shot to pay. Natheless the stranger seemed in no great hurry. He had the whim to stay a while and see what the droll tinker might do when he awoke. So he hid behind a window shutter on the outside and awaited events. Presently the tinker came to himself with a prodigious yawn, and reached at once for another drink. "What were you saying, friend, about the best plan?" "For catching this fellow." "Hello! Where's the man gone?" He had looked around and saw no one with him at the table. "Host! Host!" he shouted. "Where is that fellow who was to pay my reckoning?" "I know not," answered the landlord sharply. "Mayhap he left the money in your purse." "No, he didn't," roared Middle, looking therein. "Help! Help! I've been robbed! Look you, host, you are liable to arrest for high treason. I am here upon the king's business, as I told you earlier in the day, and yet, while I did rest under your roof, thinking you were an honest man, and one loving of the king, my pouch has been opened and many matters of state taken from it." "Cease your bellowing," said the landlord. "What did you lose?" "Oh, many weighty matters, I do assure you. I had with me, item, a warrant, granted under the hand of my Lord High Sheriff of Nottingham, and sealed with the king's own seal, for the capture and arrest and overcoming of the notorious rascal one Robin Hood of Barnesdale. Item, 1 crust of bread. Item, 1 lump of solder. Item, 3 pieces of twine. Item, 6 single keys, useful withal. Item, 12 silver pennies, the which I earned this week in fair labor. Item—" "Have done with your items," said the host, "and I marvel greatly to hear you speak in such fashion of your friend Robin Hood of Barnesdale, for was he not with you in all good fellowship?" "What? That Robin Hood?" gasped Middle with staring eyes. "Why did you not tell me?" "Faith, I saw no need of telling you. Did you not tell me the first time you were here today that I need not be surprised if you came back with no less person than Robin Hood himself?" "Jesu, give me pardon," moaned the tinker. "I see it all now. He got me to drinking, and then took my warrant, and my pennies, and my crust." "Yes, yes," interrupted the host. "I know all about that. But pay me the score for both of you." "But I have no money, gossip. Let me go after that vile bag of bones, and I'll soon get it out of him." "Not so," replied the other. "If I waited for you to collect from Robin Hood, I would soon close up shop." "What is the account?" asked Middle. 10 shillings, just." "Then take here my working bag and my good hammer too, and if I light upon that knave, I will soon come back after them." "Give me your leathern coat as well," said mine host. "The hammer and bag of tools are as naught to me." "Gray mercy!" cried Master Middle, losing what was left of his temper. "It seems that I have escaped one thief only to fall into the hands of another. If you will but walk with me out into the middle of the road, I will give you such a crack as shall drive some honesty into your thick skull." "You are wasting your breath and my time," retorted the landlord. "Give me your things and get you gone after your man, speedily." Middle thought this to be good advice, so he strode forth from the Seven Does in a black mood. Ere he had gone half a mile, he saw Robin Hood walking demurely among the trees a little in front of him. "Ho there, you villain!" roared the tinker. "Stay your steps. I am desperately in need of you this day." Robin turned about with a surprised face. "What knave is this," he asked gently, "who comes shouting after me?" "No knave at all," panted the other, rushing up, "but an honest man who would have that warrant and the money for drink." "Why, as I live, it is our honest tinker who was seeking Robin Hood. Did you find him, gossip?" "Marry, that did I, and I'm now going to pay him my respects." And he plunged at him, making a sweeping stroke with his crab-tree cudgel. Robin tried to draw his sword, but could not do it for a moment through dodging the other's furious blows. When he did get it in hand, the tinker had reached him thrice with resounding thwacks. Then the tables were turned, for he dashed in right manfully with his shining blade and made the tinker give back again. The greenwood rang with the noise of the fray. 'Twas steel against wood, and they made a terrible clattering when they came together. Robin thought at first that he could hack the cudgel to pieces, for his blade was one of Toledo finely tempered steel which the Queen had given him. But the crab-tree staff had been fired and hardened and seasoned by the tinker's arts until it was like a bar of iron, no pleasant neighbor for one's ribs. Robin presently found this out to his sorrow. The long reach and long stick got to him when 'twas impossible for him to touch his antagonist, so his sides began to ache sorely. "Hold your hand, tinker," he said at length. "I cry a boon of you." "Before I do it," said the tinker, "I'd hang you on this tree." But even as he spoke, Robin found the moment's grace for which he longed, and immediately grasped his horn and blew the three well-known blasts of the greenwood. "A murrain seize you!" roared the tinker, commencing afresh. "Up to your old tricks again, are you? Well, I'll have time to finish my job if I hurry." But Robin was quite able to hold his own at a pinch, and they had not exchanged many lunges and passes when up came Little John and Will Scarlet and a score of yeomen at their heels. Middle was seized without ceremony, while Robin sat himself down to breathe. "What is the matter," quoth Little John, "that you should sit so weariedly upon the highway side?" "Faith, that rascally tinker yonder has paid his score well upon my hide," answered Robin ruefully. "That tinker, then," said Little John, "must be itching for more work. Fain would I try if he can do as much for me." "Or me," said Will Scarlet, who, like Little John, was always willing to swing a cudgel. "Nay," laughed Robin, "belike I could have done better an he had given me time to pull a young tree up by the roots. But I hated to spoil the Queen's blade upon his tough stick, or no less tough hide. He had a warrant for my arrest which I stole from him." "Also, item, 12 silver pennies," interposed the tinker, unsubdued. "Item, 1 crust of bread, against my supper. Item, 1 lump of solder. Item, 3 pieces of twine. Item, 6 single keys. Item—" "Yes, I know," quoth the merry Robin. "I stood outside the landlord's window and heard you count over your losses. Here they are again, and the silver pennies are turned by magic into gold. Here also, if you will, is my hand." "I take it heartily, with the pence," cried Middle. "By my leathern coat and tools, which I shall presently have out of that sly host, I swear that I never yet met a man I liked as well as you. And you and your men here will take me. I swear I'll serve you honestly. Do you want a tinker? Nay, but verily you must. Who else can mend and grind your swords and patch your pannikins, and fight too when occasions serve? Mend your pots, mend your pans!" And he ended his speech with the sorniest cry of his craft. By this time the whole band was laughing uproariously at the tinker's talk. "What say you, fellows?" asked Robin. "Would not this tinker be a good recruit?" "That he would," answered Will Scarlet, clapping the new man on the back. "He will keep Friar Tuck and Much the miller's son from having the blues." So amid great merriment and right good fellowship the outlaws shook Middle by the hand, and he took oath of fealty, and thought no more of the sheriff's daughter. So ends Chapter 14. Chapter 15. How Robin Hood was tanned of the tanner. In Nottingham there lived a jolly tanner, with a hey down down a down down. His name was Arthur a Bland. There never was a squire in Nottinghamshire dare bid bold Arthur stand. And as he went forth in a summer's morning, with a hey down down a down down, To the forest of merry Sherwood, to view the red deer that range here and there, there he met with bold Robin Hood. The Sheriff's daughter bided for several days in the faint hope that she might hear tidings of the prattling tinker. But never a word heard she, and she was forced to the conclusion that her messenger had not so much as laid eyes upon the outlaw. Little recked she that he was, even then, grinding sword points and sharpening arrows out in the good greenwood, while whistling blithely or chatting merrily with the good Friar Tuck. Then she bethought herself of another good man, one Arthur a Bland, a tanner who dwelt in Nottingham town and was far famed in the tourneys round about. He had done some pretty tricks at archery, but was strongest at wrestling and the quarterstaff. For 3 years he had cast all comers to the earth in wrestling, until the famous Eric a Lincoln broke a rib for him in a mighty tussle. Howsoever, at quarterstaff he had never yet met his match, so that there was never a squire in Nottinghamshire dare bid bold Arthur stand. With a long pike staff on his shoulder, so well he could clear his way, that by 2 or 3 he made men flee, and none of them could stay. Thus at least runs the old song which tells of his might. "This is just the man for me," thought the Sheriff's daughter to herself, and she forthwith summoned him to the mansion house and commissioned him to seek out Robin Hood. The warrant was quite to Arthur's liking, for he was happiest when he was out in the forest taking a sly peep at the King's deer, and now he reckoned that he could look at them boldly, instead of by the rays of the moon. He could say to any King's forester who made bold to stop him, "I am here on the King's business." "Gramercy, no more oak bark and ditch water and the smell of half-tined hides today," quoth he gaily. "I shall e'en see what the free air of heaven tastes like, when it sweeps through the open wood." So the tanner departed joyfully upon his errand, but much more interested in the dun deer of the forest than in any two-legged rovers therein. This interest had, in fact, caused the foresters to keep a shrewd eye upon him in the past, for his tannery was apt to have plenty of meat in it that was more like venison than the law allowed. As for the outlaws, Arthur bore them no ill will. Indeed, he had felt a secret envy in his heart of their free life. But he was not afraid to meet any 2 men who might come against him. Natheless, the Sheriff's daughter did not choose a very good messenger, as you shall presently see. Away sped the tanner, a piece of bread and some wine in his wallet, a good longbow and arrows slung across his shoulder, his stout quarterstaff in his hand, and on his head a cap of troubled rawhide, so tough that it would turn the edge of a broadsword. He lost no time in getting out of the hot sun and into the welcome shade of the forest, where he stalked cautiously about, seeking some sign of the dun deer. Now it so chanced that upon that very morning Robin Hood had sent Little John to a neighboring village to buy some cloth of Lincoln green for new suits for all the band. Some of the money recently won of the King was being spent in this fashion, against the approach of winter. Will Scarlet had been sent on a similar errand to Barnesdale some time before, if you remember, only to be chased up the hill without his purchase. So today Little John was chosen, and for sweet company's sake Robin went with him a part of the way until they came to the Seven Does, the inn where Robin had recently played his prank upon Middle the tinker. Here they drank a glass of ale, to refresh themselves withal, and for good luck, and Robin tarried a bit while Little John went on his errand. Presently Robin entered the edge of the wood, when whom should he see but Arthur a Bland, busily creeping after a graceful deer that browsed alone down the glade. "Now, by St. George and the Dragon," quoth Robin to himself, "I much fear that yon same fellow is a rascally poacher come after our own and the King's meat." For you must know, by a curious process of reasoning, Robin and his men had hunted in the royal preserve so long that they had come to consider themselves joint owners to every animal which roamed therein. "Nay," he added, "this must be looked into. That cowskin cap in sooth must hide a scurvy varlet." And forthwith he crept behind a tree, and thence to another, stalking our friend Arthur as busily as Arthur was stalking the deer. This went on for quite a space, until the tanner began to come upon the deer and draw his bow in order to tickle the victim's ribs with a cloth-yard shaft. But just at this moment Robin unluckily trod upon a twig which snapped and caused the tanner to turn suddenly. Robin saw that he was discovered, so he determined to put a bold face on the matter and went forward with some smart show of authority. "Hold!" he cried. "Stay your hand. Why, who are you, bold fellow, to range so boldly here? In sooth, to be brief, ye look like a thief that has come to steal the king's deer." "Marry, it is scant concern of yours what I look like," retorted Arthur a Bland. "Who are you who speak so bravely?" "You shall soon find out who I am," quoth Robin, determining to find some sport in the matter. "I am a keeper of this forest. The king knows that I am looking after his deer for him, and therefore we must stay you." "Have you any assistance, friend?" asked the Tanner calmly, "for it is not one man alone who can stop me." "Nay, truly, gossip," replied Robin, "I have a good yew bow, also a right sharp blade at my side. Natheless, I need no better assistant than a good oak graft like unto yours. Give me a baker's dozen of minutes with it, and it shall pleasure me to crack that pate of yours for your sauciness." "Softly, my man, fair and softly. Big words never killed so much as a mouse, least of all yon deer which has got away while you were filling all the woods with your noisy breath. So choose your own playthings. For your sword and your bow I care not a straw, nor for all your arrows to boot. If I get but a knock at you, 'twill be as much as you'll need." "Now, by Our Lady, will you listen to the braggart?" cried Robin in a fine rage. "Marry, but I'll teach ye to be more mannerly." So saying, he unbuckled his belt, and flinging his bow upon the ground, he seized hold of a young sapling that was growing near by. His hunting knife soon had it severed and lopped into shape. "Now, come, fellow," said Arthur a Bland, seeing that he was ready, "and if I do not tan your hide for you in better shape than ever calfskin was turned into top boots, may a murrain seize me." "Stay," said Robin. "Methinks my cudgel is half a foot longer than yours. I would have them of equal length before you begin your tanning." "I pass not for length," bold Arthur replied. "My staff is long enough, as you will shortly find out. 8 foot and a half, and 'twill knock down a calf." Here he made it whistle in the air. "And I hope it will knock down you." Forthwith the two men spat on their hands, laid firm hold upon their cudgels, and began slowly circling round each other, looking for an opening. Now it so chanced that Little John had fared expeditiously with his errand. He had met the merchant from whom he was wont to buy Lincoln Green coming along the road, and had made known his wants in few words. The merchant readily undertook to deliver the suits by a certain day in the following month. So Little John, glad to get back to the cool shelter of the greenwood, hasted along the road lately taken by Robin. Presently he heard the sound of angry voices, one of which he recognized as his captain's. "Now, heaven forfend," quoth he, "that Robin has fallen into the clutches of a king's man. I must take a peep at this fray." So he cautiously made his way from tree to tree, as Robin had done, till he came to the little open space where Robin and Arthur were circling each other with angry looks, like two dogs at bay. "Ha! This looks interesting," muttered Little John to himself, for he loved a good quarterstaff bout above anything else in the world, and was the best man at it in all the greenwood. And he crawled quietly underneath a friendly bush, much as he had done when Robin undertook to teach Will Scarlet a lesson, and chuckled softly to himself and slapped his thigh and prepared to watch the fight at his ease. Indeed, it was both exciting and laughable. You would have chuckled one moment and caught your breath the next, to see those two stout fellows swinging their sticks, each half as long again as the men were, and thick as their arm, and edging along sideways, neither wishing to strike the first blow. At last Robin could no longer forbear, and his good right arm swung round like a flash. Ping! Went the stick on the back of the other's head, raising such a welt that the blood came. But the tanner did not seem to mind it at all, for bing went off his own staff in return, giving Robin as good as he had sent. Then the little battle was on, and furiously it waged. Fast fell the blows, but few save the first ones landed, being met in mid-air by a counter-blow, till the thwacking sticks sounded like the steady roll of a kettle-drum and the oak bark flew as fine as it had ever done in Arthur a Bland's tannery. Round and round they fought, digging their heels into the ground to keep from slipping, so that you would have vowed there had been a yoke of oxen plowing a potato patch. Round and round, up and down, in and out, their arms working like threshing machines, went the yeoman and the tanner, for a full hour, each becoming more astonished every minute that the other was such a good fellow, while Little John from underneath his bushy covert had much ado to keep from roaring aloud in pure joy. Finally Robin saw his chance and brought a full-arm blow straight down upon the other's head with a force that would have felled a bullock. But Arthur's troubled cowskin cap here stood him in good stead. The blow glanced off without doing much more than stunning him. Natheless, he reeled and had much ado to keep from falling. Seeing which Robin stayed his hand, to his own sorrow, for the tanner recovered his wits in a marvelous quick space, and sent back a sidelong blow which fairly lifted Robin off his feet and sent him tumbling onto the grass. Hold your hand, roared Robin with what little breath he had left. Hold, I say, and I will give you the freedom of the greenwood. Well, God a mercy, said Arthur, I may thank my staff for that, not you. Well, gossip, let it be as it may, but prithee tell me your name and trade. I like to know fellows who can hit a blow like that same last. I am a tanner, replied Arthur a Bland. In Nottingham long have I wrought, and if you'll come to me I swear I'll tan your hides for naught. Odds bodkins, quoth Robin ruefully, mine own hide is tanned enough for the present. Howsoever, there be others in this wood I would fain see you tackle. Harkee, if you will leave your tan pots and come with me, as sure as my name is Robin Hood, ye shan't want gold or fee. By the breath of my body, said Arthur, that will I do. And he gripped him gladly by the hand. But I am minded that I clean forgot the errand that brought me to Sherwood. I was commissioned by some, under the sheriff's roof, to capture you. So was a certain tinker, now in our service, said Robin smilingly. Verily 'tis a new way to recruit forces, said the tanner laughing loudly. But tell me, good Robin Hood, where is Little John? I fain would see him, for he is a kinsman on my mother's side. Here I am, good Arthur a Bland, said a voice, and Little John literally rolled out from under the bush to the sward. His eyes were full of tears from much laughter which had well nigh left him powerless to get on his feet. As soon as the astonished tanner saw who it was, he gave Little John a mighty hug around the neck, and lifted him up on his feet, and the two pounded each other on the back soundly, so glad were they to meet again. "Oh, man," said Little John, as soon as he had got his breath, "never saw I so fine a sight in all my born days. You did knock him over like as he were a ninepin." "And you do joy to see me thwacked about on the ribs?" asked Robin with some choler. "Nay, not that, master," said Little John, "but 'tis the second time I have had special tickets to a show from beneath the bushes, and I cannot forbear my delight. Howsoever, take no shame unto yourself, for this same Arthur a Bland is the best man at the quarterstaff in all Nottinghamshire. It commonly takes 2 or 3 men to hold him." "Unless it be Eric o' Lincoln," said Arthur modestly, "and I well know how you paid him out at the fair." "Say no more," said Robin, springing to his feet, "for well I know that I have done good business this day, and a few bruises are easy payment for the stout cudgel I am getting into the band. Your hand again, good Arthur a Bland. Come, let us after the deer of which I spoiled your stalking." "Righty gladly," quoth Arthur. "Come, cousin Little John, away with vats and tan bark and vile-smelling cowhides. I'll follow you two in the sweet open air to the very ends of earth." So ends Chapter 15. Chapter 16. How Robin Hood met Sir Richard of the Lea. Then answered him the gentle knight, with words both fair and thee. "God save thee, my good Robin, and all thy company." Now you must know that some months passed by. The winter dragged its weary length through Sherwood Forest, and Robin Hood and his merry men found what cheer they could in the big crackling fires before their woodland cave. Friar Tuck had built him a little hermitage not far away, where he lived comfortably with his numerous dogs. The winter, I say, reached an end at last, and the blessed spring came and went. Another summer passed on apace, and still neither king nor sheriff nor bishop could catch the outlaws, who, meanwhile, thrived and prospered mightily in their outlawry. The band had been increased from time to time by picked men such as Arthur a Bland and David of Doncaster, he who was the jolliest cobbler for miles around, until it now numbered a full 70 of men, 7 companies each with its stout lieutenant serving under Robin Hood, and still they relieved the purses of the rich, and aided the poor, and feasted upon king's deer until the lank Sheriff of Nottingham was well nigh distracted. Indeed, that official would probably have lost his office entirely had it not been for the fact of the king's death. Henry passed away, as all kings will, in common with ordinary men, and Richard of the Lionheart was proclaimed as his successor. Then Robin and his men, after earnest debate, resolved to throw themselves upon the mercy of the new king, swear allegiance, and ask to be organized into royal foresters. So Will Scarlet and Will Stuteley and Little John were sent to London with this message, which they were first to entrust privately to Maid Marian. But they soon returned with bad tidings. The new king had formally set forth upon a crusade to the Holy Land, and Prince John, his brother, was impossible to deal with, being crafty, cruel, and treacherous. He was laying his hands upon all the property which could easily be seized. Among other estates, that of the Earl of Huntingdon, Robin's old enemy and Marian's father, who had lately died. Marian herself was in sore straits. Not only had her estates been taken away, and the maid been deprived of the former protection of the Queen, but the evil Prince John had persecuted her with his attentions. He thought that since the maid was defenseless, he could carry her away to one of his castles and none would gainsay him. No word of this peril reached Robin's ears, although his men brought him word of the seizure of the Huntingdon lands. Natheless, he was greatly alarmed for the safety of Maid Marian, and his heart cried out for her strongly. She had been continually in his thoughts ever since the memorable shooting at London town. One morning in early autumn, when the leaves were beginning to turn gold at the edges, the chestnut pods to swell with promise of fatness, and the whole wide woodland was redolent with the ripe fragrance of fruit and flower, Robin was walking along the edge of a small open glade, busy with his thoughts. The peace of the woods was upon him, despite his broodings of Marian, and he paid little heed to a group of does quietly feeding among the trees at the far edge of the glade. But presently this sylvan picture was rudely disturbed for him. A stag, wild and furious, dashed suddenly forth from among the trees, scattering the does in swift alarm. The vicious beast eyed the green and gold tunic of Robin, and lowering its head, charged at him impetuously. So sudden was its attack that Robin had no time to bend his bow. He sprang behind a tree while he seized his weapon. A moment later the wild stag crashed blindly into the tree trunk with a shock which sent the beast reeling backward, while the dislodging leaves from the shivering tree fell in a small shower over Robin's head. "By my halidom, I am glad it was not me you struck, my gentle friend," quoth Robin, fixing an arrow upon the string. "Sorry indeed would be anyone's plight who should encounter you in this black humor." Scarcely had he spoken when he saw the stag veer about and fix its glances rigidly on the bushes to the left side of the glade. These were parted by a delicate hand, and through the opening appeared the slight figure of a page. It was Maid Marian, come back again to the greenwood. She advanced, unconscious alike of Robin's horrified gaze and the evil fury of the stag. She was directly in line with the animal, so Robin dared not launch an arrow. Her own bow was slung across her shoulder, and her small sword would be useless against the beast's charge. But now as she caught sight of the stag she pursed her lips as though she would whistle to it. "For the love of God, dear lady!" cried Robin, and then the words died in his throat. With a savage snort of rage the beast rushed at this new and inviting target, rushed so swiftly and from so short a distance that she could not defend herself. She sprang to one side as it charged down upon her, but a side blow from its antlers stretched her upon the ground. The stag stopped, turned, and lowered its head, preparing to gore her to death. Already its cruel horns were coming straight for her, while she, white of face and bewildered by the sudden attack, was struggling to rise and draw her sword. A moment more and the end would come, but the sharp voice of Robin had already spoken. "Down, Marian!" he cried, and the girl instinctively obeyed, just as the shaft from Robin's bow went whizzing close above her head and struck with terrific force full in the center of the stag's forehead. The beast stumbled in its charge and fell dead, across the body of the fainting maid. Robin was quickly by her side and dragged the beast from off the girl. Picking her up in his strong arms, he bore her swiftly to the side of one of the many brooks which watered the vale. He dashed cool water upon her face, roughly almost, in his agony of fear that she was already dead, and he could have shed tears of joy to see those poor closed eyelids tremble. He redoubled his efforts, and presently she gave a little gasp. "Where am I? What is it?" "You are in Sherwood, dear maid, though, I' faith, we gave you a rude reception." She opened her eyes and sat up. "Methinks you have rescued me from sudden danger, sir," she said. Then she recognized Robin for the first time, and a radiant smile came over her face, together with the rare blush of returned vitality, and her head sank upon his shoulder with a little tremble and sigh of relief. "Oh, Robin, it is you," she murmured. "Aye, 'tis I. Thank Heaven I was at hand to do you service." Robin's tones were deep and full of feeling. "I swear, dear Marian, that I will not let you from my care henceforth." Not another word was spoken for some moments, while her head still rested confidingly upon his breast. Then recollecting, he suddenly cried, "Gramercy, but I make a poor nurse. I have not even asked if any of your bones were broken." "No, not any," she answered, springing lightly to her feet to show him. "That foolish dizziness o'ercame me for the nonce, but we can now proceed on our way." "Nay, I meant not that," he protested. "Why should we haste? First tell me of the news in London town, and of yourself." So she told him how that the prince had seized upon her father's lands and had promised to restore them to her if she would listen to his suit, and how that she knew he meant her no good, for he was even then suing for a princess's hand. "That is all, Robin," she ended simply, "and that is why I donned again my page's costume and came to you in the greenwood." Robin's brow had grown fiercely black at the recital of her wrong, and he had lain stern hand upon the hilt of his sword. "By this sword which Queen Eleanor gave me," he said impetuously, "and which was devoted to the service of all womankind, I take oath that Prince John and all his army shall not harm you." So that is how Maid Marian came to take up her abode in the greenwood, where the whole band of yeomen welcomed her gladly and swore fealty, and where the sweet lady of Allen a Dale made her fully at home. But this was a day of deeds in Sherwood Forest, and we again to tell you another happening which led to later events. While Robin and Marian were having their encounter with the stag, Little John, Much the miller's son, and Will Scarlet had sallied forth to watch the high road leading to Barnesdale, if perchance they might find some haughty knight or fat priest whose wallet needed lightening. They had scarcely watched the great road known as Watling Street, which runs from Dover in Kent to Chestertown, for many minutes, when they espied a knight riding by in a very forlorn and careless manner. All dreary was his semblance, and little was his pride. His one foot in the stirrup stood, his other waved beside. His visor hung down o'er his eyes, he rode in single array. A sorrier man than he was one, rode never in summer's day. Little John came up to the knight and bade him stay, for who can judge of a man's wealth by his looks? The outlaw bent his knee in all courtesy, and prayed him to accept the hospitality of the forest. "My master expects you to dine with him today," quoth he, "and indeed has been fasting while awaiting your coming, these 3 hours." "Who is your master?" asked the knight. "None other than Robin Hood," replied Little John, laying his hand upon the knight's bridle. Seeing the other 2 outlaws approaching, the knight shrugged his shoulders and replied indifferently, "'Tis clear that your invitation is too urgent to admit of refusal," quoth he, "and I go with you right willingly, my friends. My purpose was to have dined today at Blythe or Doncaster, but nothing matters greatly." So in the same lackadaisical fashion which had marked all his actions that day, the knight suffered his horse to be led to the rendezvous of the band in the greenwood. Marian had not yet had time to change her page's attire when the 3 escorts of the knight hove in sight. She recognized their captive as Sir Richard of the Leah, whom she had often seen at court, and fearing lest he might recognize her, she would have fled. But Robin asked her with a twinkle if she would not like to play page that day, and she in roguish mood consented to do so. "Welcome, Sir Knight," said Robin courteously. "You are come in good time, for we were just preparing to sit down to meat." "God save and thank you, good Master Robin," returned the knight, and all your company. It likes me well to break the fast with you. So while his horse was cared for, the knight laid aside his own heavy gear, and laved his face and hands, and sat down with Robin and all his men to a most plentiful repast of venison, swans, pheasants, various small birds, cake, and ale. And Marion stood behind Robin and filled his cup and that of the guest. After eating right heartily of the good cheer, the knight brightened up greatly and vowed that he had not enjoyed so good a dinner for nigh 3 weeks. He also said that if ever Robin and his fellows should come to his domains, he would strive to set them down to as good a dinner on his own behalf. But this was not exactly the sort of payment which Robin had expected to receive. He thanked the knight, therefore, in set phrase, but reminded him that a yeoman like himself might hardly offer such a dinner to a knight as a gift of charity. "I have no money, Master Robin," answered the knight frankly. "I have so little of the world's goods, in sooth, that I should be ashamed to offer you the whole of it." "Money, however little, always jingles merrily in our pockets," said Robin, smiling. "Pray you tell me what you deem a little sum." "I have of my own 10 silver pennies," said the knight. "Here they are, and I wish they were 10 times as many." He handed Little John his pouch, and Robin nodded carelessly. "What say you to the total, Little John?" he asked as though in jest. "'Tis true enough, as the worthy knight hath said," responded the big fellow, gravely emptying the contents on his cloak. Robin signed to Marion, who filled a bumper of wine for himself and his guest. "Pledge me, Sir Knight," cried the merry outlaw, "and pledge me heartily, for these sorry times. I see that your armor is bent and that your clothes are torn. Yet methinks I saw you at court, once upon a day, and in more prosperous guise. Tell me now, were you a yeoman and made a knight by force? Or have you been a bad steward to yourself, and wasted your property in lawsuits and the like? Be not bashful with us. We shall not betray your secrets." "I am a Saxon knight in my own right, and I have always lived a sober and quiet life," the sorrowful guest replied. "'Tis true you have seen me at court, mayhap, for I was an excited witness of your shooting before King Harry, God rest his bones. My name is Sir Richard of the Lea, and I dwell in a castle, not a league from one of the gates of Nottingham, which has belonged to my father, and his father's father before him. Within 2 or 3 years ago, my neighbors might have told you that a matter of 400 pounds one way or the other was as naught to me. But now I have only these 10 pennies of silver and my wife and son." "In what manner have you lost your riches?" asked Robin. "Through folly and kindness," said the knight, sighing. "I went with King Richard upon a crusade, from which I am but lately returned, in time to find my son, a goodly youth, grown up. He was but 20, yet he had achieved a squire's training, and could play prettily in jousts and tournaments and other knightly games. But about this time he had the ill luck to push his sport too far, and did accidentally kill a knight in the open lists. To save the boy, I had to sell my lands and mortgage my ancestral castle, and this not being enough, in the end I have had to borrow money, at a ruinous interest, from my lord of Hereford." "A most worthy bishop," said Robin ironically. "What is the sum of your debt?" 400 pounds, said Sir Richard, "and the bishop swears he will foreclose the mortgage if they are not paid promptly." "Have you any friends who would become surety for you?" "Not one. If good King Richard were here, the tale might be otherwise." "Fill your goblet again, Sir Knight," said Robin, and he turned to whisper a word in Marion's ear. She nodded and drew Little John and Will Scarlet aside and talked earnestly with them in a low tone. "Here is health and prosperity to you, gallant Robin," said Sir Richard, tilting his goblet. "I hope I may pay your cheer more worthily the next time I ride by." Will Scarlet and Little John had meanwhile fallen in with Marion's idea, for they consulted the other outlaws, who nodded their heads. Thereupon Little John and Will Scarlet went into the cave near by, and presently returned bearing a bag of gold. This they counted out before the astonished knight, and there were 4 times 100 gold pieces in it. "Take this loan from us, Sir Knight, and pay your debt to the bishop," then said Robin. "Nay, no thanks. You are but exchanging creditors. Mayhap we shall not be so hard upon you as the Christian bishop, yet again we may be harder. Who can tell?" There were actual tears in Sir Richard's eyes as he essayed to thank the foresters. But at this juncture Much, the miller's son, came from the cave dragging a bale of cloth. "The knight should have a suit worthy of his rank, master. Think you not so?" "Measure him 20 ells of it," ordered Robin. "Give him a good horse also," whispered Marion. "'Tis a gift which will come back fourfold, for this is a worthy man. I know him well." So the horse was given also, and Robin bade Arthur a Bland ride with the knight as far as his castle, as esquire. The knight was sorrowful no longer, yet he could hardly voice his thanks through his broken utterance. And having spent the night in rest, and listening to Allen a Dale's singing, he mounted his new steed the following morning, an altogether different man. "God save you, comrades, and keep you all," said he, with deep feeling in his tones, "and God give me a grateful heart." "We shall wait for you 12 months from today here in this place," said Robin, shaking him by the hand, "and then you will repay us the loan, if you have been prospered." "I shall return it to you within the year, upon my honor as Sir Richard of the Lea, and for all time pray count on me as a steadfast friend." So saying, the knight and his esquire rode down the forest glade till they were lost to view. So ends Chapter 16. Chapter 17. How the Bishop was dined. "Oh, what is the matter?" then said the Bishop. "Or for whom do you make this ado? Or why do you kill the king's venison when your company is so few?" "We are shepherds," quoth bold Robin Hood, "and we keep sheep all the year. And we are disposed to be merry this day, and to kill of the king's fat deer." Not many days after Sir Richard of the Lea came to Sherwood Forest, word reached Robin Hood's ears that my Lord Bishop of Hereford would be riding that way betimes on that morning. 'Twas Arthur a Bland, the knight's quondam esquire, who brought the tidings, and Robin's face brightened as he heard it. "Now, by Our Lady," quoth he, "I have long desired to entertain my lord in the greenwood, and this is too fair a chance to let slip. Come, my men, kill me a venison, kill me a good fat deer. The Bishop of Hereford is to dine with me today, and he shall pay well for his cheer." "Shall we dress it here as usual?" asked Much, the miller's son. "Nay, we play a droll game on the churchman. We will dress it by the highway side, and watch for the bishop narrowly, lest he should ride some other way." So Robin gave his orders, and the main body of his men dispersed to different parts of the forest, under Will Stuteley and Little John, to watch other roads, while Robin Hood himself took 6 of his men, including Will Scarlet and Much, and posted himself in full view of the main road. This little company appeared funny enough, I assure you, for they had disguised themselves as shepherds. Robin had an old wool cap, with a tail to it, hanging over his ear, and a shock of hair stood straight up through a hole in the top. Besides, there was so much dirt on his face that you would never have known him. An old tattered cloak over his hunter's garb completed his make-up. The others were no less ragged and unkempt, even the foppish Will Scarlet being so badly run down at the heel that the court ladies would hardly have had speech with him. They quickly provided themselves with a deer and made great preparations to cook it over a small fire, when a little dust was seen blowing along the highway, and out of it came the portly bishop, cantering along with 10 men-at-arms at his heels. As soon as he saw the fancied shepherds, he spurred up his horse and came straight toward them. "Who are ye fellows who make so free with the king's deer?" he asked sharply. "We are shepherds," answered Robin Hood, pulling at his forelock awkwardly. "Heaven have mercy, ye seem a sorry lot of shepherds. But who gave you leave to cease eating mutton?" "'Tis one of our feast days, lording, and we were disposed to be merry this day, and make free with a deer, out here where there are so many." "By me faith, the king shall hear of this. Who killed yon beast?" "Give me first your name, excellence, so that I may speak where 'tis fitting," replied Robin stubbornly. "'Tis my Lord Bishop of Hereford, fellow," interposed one of the guards fiercely. "See that you keep a civil tongue in your head." "If 'tis a churchman," retorted Will Scarlet, "he would do better to mind his own flocks rather than concern himself with ours." "Ye are saucy fellows in sooth," cried the bishop, "and we will see if your heads will pay for your manners. Come, Quit your stolen roast and march along with me, for you shall be brought before the sheriff of Nottingham forthwith." "Pardon, excellence," said Robin, dropping on his knees. "Pardon, I pray you. It becomes not your lordship's coat to take so many lives away." "Faith, I'll pardon you," said the bishop. "I'll pardon you when I see you hanged. Seize upon them, my men." But Robin had already sprung away with his back against a tree, and from underneath his ragged cloak he drew his trusty horn and winded the piercing notes which were wont to summon the band. The bishop no sooner saw this action than he knew his man, and that there was a trap set, and being an arrant coward, he wheeled his horse sharply and would have made off down the road, but his own men, spurred on the charge, blocked his way. At almost the same instant the bushes round about seemed literally to come alive with outlaws. Little John's men came from one side and Will Stuteley's from the other. In less time than it takes to tell it, the worthy bishop found himself a prisoner, and began to crave mercy from the men he had so lately been ready to sentence. "O pardon," said the bishop, "O pardon, I you pray. For if I had known it had been you, I'd have gone some other way." "I owe you no pardon," retorted Robin, "but I will e'en treat you better than you would have treated me. Come, make haste, and go along with me. I have already planned that you shall dine with me this day." So the unwilling prelate was dragged away, cheek by jowl, with the half-cooked venison upon the back of his own horse, and Robin and his band took charge of the whole company and led them through the forest glades till they came to an open space near Barnesdale. Here they rested, and Robin gave the bishop a seat full courteously. Much the miller's son fell to roasting the deer afresh, while another and fatter beast was set to frizzle on the other side of the fire. Presently the appetizing odor of the cooking reached the bishop's nostrils, and he sniffed it eagerly. The morning's ride had made him hungry, and he was nothing loath when they bade him come to the dinner. Robin gave him the best place beside himself, and the bishop prepared to fall to. "Nay, my lord, craving your pardon, but we are accustomed to have grace before meat," said Robin decorously. "And as our own chaplain is not with us today, will you be good enough to say it for us?" The bishop reddened, but pronounced grace in the Latin tongue hastily, and then settled himself to make the best of his lot. Red wines and ale were brought forth and poured out, each man having a horn tankard from which to drink. Laughter bubbled among the diners, and the bishop caught himself smiling at more than one jest. But who, in sooth, could resist a freshly broiled venison steak eaten out in the open air to the tune of jest and good fellowship? Stuteley filled the bishop's beaker with wine each time he emptied it, and the bishop got mellower and mellower as the afternoon shades lengthened on toward sunset. Then the approaching dusk warned him of his position. "I wish, mine host," quoth he gravely to Robin, who had soberly drunk but one cup of ale, "that you would now call a reckoning. 'Tis late, and I fear the cost of this entertainment may be more than my poor purse can stand." For he bethought himself of his friend the sheriff's former experience. "Verily, your lordship," said Robin, scratching his head, "I have enjoyed your company so much that I scarce know how to charge for it." "Lend me your purse, my lord," said Little John, interposing, "and I'll give you the reckoning by and by." The bishop shuddered. He had collected Sir Richard's debt only that morning, and was even then carrying it home. "I have but a few silver pennies of my own," he whined, "and as for the gold in my saddlebags, 'tis for the church. Ye surely would not levy upon the church, good friends." But Little John was already gone to the saddlebags, and returning he laid the bishop's cloak upon the ground, and poured out of the portmanteau a matter of 400 glittering gold pieces. 'Twas the identical money which Robin had lent Sir Richard a short while before. "Ah," said Robin, as though an idea had but just then come to him, "the church is always willing to aid in charity, and seeing this goodly sum reminds me that I have a friend who is indebted to a churchman for this exact amount. Now we shall charge you nothing by our own account, but suffer us to make use of this in aiding my good friend." "Nay, nay," began the bishop with a wry face. "This is requiting me ill indeed. Was this not the king's meat, after all, that we feasted upon? Furthermore, I am a poor man." "Poor, forsooth," answered Robin in scorn. "You are the Bishop of Hereford, and does not the whole countryside speak of your oppression? Who does not know of your cruelty to the poor and ignorant? You, who should use your great office to aid them instead of oppress. Have you not been guilty of far greater robbery than this, even though less open? Of myself and how you have pursued me I say nothing, nor of your unjust enmity against my father. But on account of those you have despoiled and oppressed, I take this money and will use it far more worthily than you would. God be my witness in this. There is an end of the matter, unless you will lead us in a song or dance to show that your body had a better spirit than your mind. Come, strike up the harp, Allen." "Neither the one nor the other will I do," snarled the bishop. "Faith, then we must help you," said Little John, and he and Arthur a Bland seized the fat, struggling churchman and commenced to hop up and down. The bishop, being shorter, must perforce accompany them in their gyrations, while the whole company sat and rolled about over the ground and roared to see my Lord of Hereford's queer capers. At last he sank in a heap, fuddled with wine and quite exhausted. Little John picked him up as though he were a log of wood, and carrying him to his horse, set him astride facing the animal's tail, and thus fastened him, leading the animal toward the high road, and starting the bishop, more dead than alive, toward Nottingham. So ends chapter 17.